Mm. Welcome to the real, unfiltered, unfiltered story. Yeah, this is me. No mask, no filter, just honesty. Real life, real pain, real victory. Unfiltered stories, come right with me. I don't sugarcoat it, I just tell the truth. Every scar, every lesson, every hidden proof. Had to lose, had to fall just to rise again. Now I speak from a place where I've already been. See the world try to shape me, break me down. But I found my voice when I lost that sound. Now I walk in purpose, I move in light. And I say what I feel, I don't dim my sight. This ain't surface, this that deep, this that truth most people keep. What I lived, I now release, so somebody else can breathe. No filter stories, yeah, this is me. No mask, no filter, just honesty. Real life, real pain, real victory. Unfiltered stories, come right with me. This is where truth lives. This is where healing begins. This is Unfiltered Stories with Dr. K. Unfiltered. Mm. No filter. Just truth.
Peace, love, light, and blessings. And this is Dr. K coming in for a quick pop up episode, Unfiltered Stories from Dr. K. And so I'm going to try to make this as brief as possible, but I had to go live with this on today because I have experienced, communication issues. And though I am a good communicator, but I could be better. And I have learned, from a spiritual standpoint and now a natural, that even when we are good communicators, we could still do better. And so I'm just gonna break down some stuff today. And as I'm breaking certain stuff down, on, put, you know, what I've experienced within that as well. And so before I go forth, I want you guys to please share, tag, and invite. Sharing is caring, sharing is sowing a seed. And if you are not subscribed to Unfiltered Stories from Dr. K on YouTube or Spotify, go ahead and do that now. And as you're doing that, I want you to please subscribe to the Prophetic Lounge. I am, a prophetic poet, and it's about to get real over there. I am hosting my first event in St. Petersburg at JQ's Wednesday, June 17th, the week of Juneteenth. It is a Juneteenth event. I'm hosting, but I am primarily the only one who will be going forth doing my poetry. And so if you are in the St. Petersburg or Tampa area, I want you to come out and support. If not, I will be uploading it to the Prophetic Lounge. And so let's just move forth here. Let's move forth. So communication is a form of respect. So today's conversation is one that has been sitting heavy in my spirit because communication affects every area of our life. It affects our relationships, our marriages, our friendships, our business partnerships, our ministry partnerships, our family. And communication affects every connection God places in our lives. And communication even affects, our relationship with the Trinity. And so that's why I always say relationship, relationship, relationship with the Father, the Son, the Holy Spirit. And one thing I've learned through life, through ministry, through business, and through relationships is this: communication is a form of respect. When we communicate, we are saying, I value you enough to create understanding. I value you enough to address concerns. I value you enough to tell you the truth, and I value you enough not to leave you guessing. And the reason why I did this episode is because, a few days ago, something happened to me when it comes to communication. And because I'm apostolic and prophetic, I have a tendency to speak what I'm seeing, okay? And or reveal something that needs to be revealed to an individual. But even in that, you have to use wisdom, because a person can be wounded at that time. They can still be going through healing. They cannot understand your communication style yet, and then you come off, and you're very direct, which I am. But it took me a long time to get direct like this. I had to go through a lot of stuff, and now I am very direct just in general, and I have boundaries now. But still in that, we still have to understand people's communication styles. So communication from a spiritual perspective. Before communication was ever natural, communication was spiritual. God is a communicator from Genesis to Revelations. God is constantly speaking. The Father communicates. Jesus communicates. The Holy Spirit communicates. Prayer itself is communication. Worship is communication. Discernment is communication. Conviction is communication. The Word of God is communication. So the entire kingdom functions through relationship, and relationship cannot thrive without communication. So when people say communication isn't important, I would argue that communication is foundational. And we got to have that foundation, because without communication, there can be no understanding. Without understanding, there can be no trust. And without trust, there can be no healthy covenant. And this just stems back to the first episode. No more potential covenant. Okay, so if y'all haven't watched the first episode, I need you to go back and watch the first episode that aired on the 31st of May. Communication from a natural perspective. Naturally speaking, communication is more than talking. Communication is how we express our feelings, our expectations, our concerns, our boundaries, our desires, our fears, our appreciation, our love. Communication creates clarity. And clarity eliminates confusion, because remember, our God is not an author of confusion. One of the enemy's greatest tools is confusion, because confusion creates assumptions. Assumptions create misunderstandings, and misunderstandings create division, and division destroys relationships. This is why healthy communication matters. And this is why I am a direct communicator. I move in action, but I am a direct communicator, because I want to nip stuff in the bud, because I see things from a spiritual perspective, and many of us remnant and chosen do, and we want to go ahead and uproot that stuff before it sets root in something that is foundational of God, that is supposed to produce fruit. So, you know, and I'm saying this to everybody. If you have an individual in your life that is a chosen remnant, that's apostolic and prophetic, don't take it to heart. I'm gonna say, don't take it to spirit, don't take it to mind, how we want to confront and address things, because we're seeing things from a spiritual perspective. And like I said, we're not fighting a natural battle, we're fighting a spiritual battle. And wherever the enemy can try to get in, okay, when it comes to relationships, because see, the enemy likes division, because there's power in numbers. And when God brings forth covenant, kingdom covenant, the enemy know that things pertaining to his demise is going to be uprooted, severed, and destroyed. And so please don't take it to heart from us, because we love, you know what I'm saying, from a deep well, and we know and see covenant within things, and we want to nip it in the bud before the enemy can try to take root in something that we know is from God. So the different forms of communication. Many people think communication is simply verbal, but it's not. Communication takes many forms. Verbal communication is the words we speak, the conversations we have, the questions we ask. Nonverbal communication, facial expressions, body language, eye contact, tone of voice, energy, presence. Okay. You got your written communication. We know text messages, emails, social media. That's why a lot of times now most people know me. I am a texter, but there are some times where I know I just have to get on the phone and talk to a person, because even text messages can bring forth assumptions because of how you may be texting. But all along, you don't mean anything by it. Because sometimes a conversation needs to be had. Behavioral communication, our actions, our consistency, our reliability, our follow through, because actions communicate just as loudly as words. In fact, sometimes actions communicate more clearly than words. And I used to always say as a little girl, actions speak louder than words. Because one thing I loved about my father, rest his soul, is my father didn't always tell us all the time, I love you, I love you, I love you. He showed an action. And I also was predominantly an action person and really didn't open up my mouth a lot to say that I loved a person. But now, being who I am in God, I like to express it, because it's good to hear that you love a person, in love of the Lord, you're proud of a person, you appreciate a person, you value a person, but also showing it in action too, that you love them and appreciate them. And my father, though he wasn't wordy, but I still appreciated my father, because I know that my father adamantly loved us and worked hard to do the best that he can do. And so I still value action. So, and yes, even silence communicates something. Because when I'm telling you, man, silence can communicate a lot. Because when a person, shuts down from you, and you pick up on, their spirit, that energy, things like that, and you like, man, what's going on, and see that again can set in, the assumption thing. But that's why it's always important to have a relationship with the Father, and to be able to discern that sometimes even when a person shuts down, it's not necessarily because you did anything, but maybe they're processing it out, or they don't really know how to communicate, maybe something you said or that was done. So we have to understand a person on a spiritual level. We even have to understand a person as to what they done been through. That's why, I'm very transparent. Like, when I know it's a covenant relationship, in general, I do tend to open up to let people know, what I've been through, so they can know that, if I, you know, um receive something in a way that it's not because they've done anything, it's because of what I've been through. And that's something within me that I may still need to work on. Okay. Because again, though I'm a remnant and chosen, I'm not perfect. None of us are perfect. So we still have to, sort through things that we've been through in our lives as well. Because many of us that are chosen, we've been through more than the average person. Some of us have been through what 10 people have gone through in every area of our lives. So, this is just, I'm just spewing out their general understanding, because sometimes we wonder why, relationships fail, and it's simply because nobody is communicating properly, you know um for each other to understand each other, and where you've come from and what you've been through. So the question is, what are we communicating? Not how are we communicating, but what are we communicating? Okay. My personal experience with communication, I've learned that I'm a very communicative person. I am. If I care about you, I'm going to communicate. If I see something, I'm going to communicate. If there's a misunderstanding, I'm going to communicate. If there is a concern, I'm going to communicate. Now, sometimes people receive this as intimidating. Sometimes they receive it as harsh. Sometimes they receive it as confrontational. Sometimes they receive it as being too direct, but my intention has never been to wound. My intention is clarity, because I have learned that what goes unaddressed often grows. That's why when I'm in the working environment as a nurse practitioner and I start to see problems, I like to address it right then and there. And if that means I have to pull in the other person that might have said something or feel a certain way, don't talk to me about something without that person in there. And, I had this conversation at work with the owner. And I'm like, I nip stuff in the bud because I see it coming. And so don't bring me what somebody said about me without having them right there so we can nip it in the bud. That's just how I am. And I can remember being like that even as a young girl in junior high and high school, because I was, feisty, Kendra Fire. Okay. And I would want to address it with the individual, like, hey, it, I feel like if you have a problem with me, let's address it. If I have a problem with you, let's address it, because sometimes it could be just a misunderstanding, you know and let's address the misunderstanding, so then therefore it doesn't set root and then cause even more disturbances. So because unspoken issues become resentment, unspoken concerns become assumptions. Unspoken feelings become distance, and distance becomes disconnection. Truth can feel offensive. One thing I have learned is that truth often hurts before it heals. Not because truth is wrong, but because truth reveals things we may not want to face at that time. We've all been through this. When we've been in some of our most wounded states, before we answered our call, the stuff that we were going through, it was a family member, somebody that came to us and was like, what you doing, you need to stop. And at that time we didn't want to hear it, but it needed to be revealed. And we needed to face it. And many of us faced those things, and that's why we are where we are now instead of back what we used to be. And when we were emotionally wounded, we sometimes interpreted honesty as an attack. We interpret correction as rejection. We interpret accountability as criticism. But healthy communication requires maturity, not just from the person speaking, but from the person receiving as well. And so different people communicate differently. This is where many relationships struggle. Not because people don't care, but because people communicate differently. Some people are direct communicators, some people are processors. Some people communicate through words, some communicate through actions, some communicate immediately, some need time to gather their thoughts. The direct communicator may view the processor as avoidant. The processor may view the direct communicator as aggressive. The verbal communicator may view the quiet communicator as disconnected. The quiet communicator may view the verbal communicator as overwhelming. Neither person is necessarily wrong, they're simply different. So, this is why I said I've always considered myself a good communicator, but could be better, because we have to stop trying to make people communicate like we do. We come from different backgrounds, we had different, we may have some similar things, but different hurt, heartache, pain, trauma, generational bondages, everything. So, I had to stop trying to make people communicate like me and stop putting expectations on an individual because of who I am, because I know who I am in God, and I know the love that I possess of God that spews out. So that's where I had to set in boundaries too, because I'm like, when I started to expect a person to be like me, that's when I was disappointed oftentimes in relationships in general, whether it was a friendship, or a intimate relationship, or a ministry relationship, or a business relationship. So one of the greatest mistakes we can make is trying to force people to communicate exactly like us. But healthy communication isn't about control. It's about curiosity. It's about understanding. It's about learning. And instead of asking, why don't they communicate like me? Ask, help me to understand how you communicate. Help me to understand how you process. Help me to understand what you need when conflict arises. That changes the whole trajectory. Adaptation is not compromise of identity. Now, hear me clearly, you guys. Adapting to someone else's communication style does not mean abandoning your own. It simply means making room for one another. The direct communicator may need to soften their delivery. The processor may need to communicate that they need time. The verbal communicator may need to listen more. The quiet communicator may need to speak up more. Both people adjust. Both people learn each other's communication styles. Both people grow. That's healthy communication. Communication, covenant, and relationships. This is why communication is so important in covenant relationships, whether that's a marriage, friendships, business partnerships, ministry partnerships, your family. Communication is what keeps covenant healthy because covenant is not sustained by feelings. Okay? It's not. Covenant is sustained through commitment, understanding, trust, and communication. I've always said this about feelings. And even though like I often have to ask God, like, you know, I ask him every day, like, enter in and you take over every aspect of me. Let let my emotions and my feelings be directed to you and not let them smeal out on people. But there are times to where I have been so overwhelmed because of the calling on my life. Many are called, few are chosen. So I'm gonna say the chosen state on my life. You think I am chosen to a huge, calling, and I have children, I work, I have businesses, I do poetry, and the list goes on. So there's times that I get overwhelmed, and my communication style can get very feeling based and emotion based, and I have to ask God, hey, please forgive me. Like, help me to check my emotions, like heart check. Okay. Heart check. So covenant is not sustained through commitment. Covenant, I'm sorry, is sustained through commitment, understanding, trust, and communication. And so you cannot build covenant while avoiding conversations. You cannot build trust while withholding truth, and you cannot build intimacy while remaining disconnected. So these are questions to reflect on as we close. I was not going to be long-winded tonight. This was a quick pop-up. What is my communication style? That's questions you need to ask yourself. Do I listen to understand or listen to respond? That's many people, even us remnant and chosen. Sometimes you're listening because you already want to respond. But sometimes we need to listen to understand and take it to the Father, even in them quick seconds, to say, okay, what do my response need to be? Sometimes your response need to be is to simply listen. Let that person speak what they need to speak instead of being defensive. And then once that individual's done and you have processed out what they have said from a spiritual standpoint, then you can respond. But your response needs to be a, a correct response, not a defensive response, because that's another form of communication that throws relationships off. Is when every time somebody wants you to simply understand where they're coming from, you want to get defensive every time they say something. And men and women, we cannot do that. We cannot do that, even though we may be seeing stuff spiritually. But that means use wisdom, take that to God, and pray about that. Not move in a defensive manner of communication. Next question. Have I communicated my needs clearly? Sometimes I have thought that I have communicated my needs clearly, but I was going all around it. So we have to communicate our needs clearly. Just how we're able to go and talk to somebody that we're close to about something that's bothering us with a relationship, and we can communicate to them clearly what we're looking for and what we need. Well, we need to take that same aspect back to the individual that we, need to address pertaining to these things. Next, have I expected people to read my mind? And as remnant chosen, and sometimes as women, okay, women, us in a relationship, sometimes we feel like our man, our husband should automatically know A, B, and C. Sometimes they do. If you guys have a spiritual connection and you've been with each other long enough, then they know. But there's some times where they don't know. And I can say vice versa. And that is why we have to communicate our needs, our wants, or if we're having a problem with the way in which somebody's doing something. Am I creating understanding or confusion? We can definitely create confusion if we don't know how to communicate properly and communicate our needs to an individual properly, vice versa. Okay. Am I respecting people enough to communicate honestly? Because I said, well, communication is a form of respect. Am I respecting people enough to learn how they communicate? Now, that's a question that needs to be put back on some of us. Because there has been times in the past, before I even answer my call, and even as I answer my call, that that was a negative for me. Am I respecting people enough to learn how they communicate? And there's times where no, I wasn't respecting them enough to learn how they communicated, because I felt as though the way that I communicated was the proper way. And it wasn't. Because communication is more than talking. Communication is more than words. Communication is more than conflict resolution. Communication is a form of respect. And when respect is present, relationships have room to grow. Can I say that again? And when respect is present, relationships have room to grow. And so I'm wrapping it up, okay? I just needed to get that out. And so I will be back really soon. I'm bringing an individual on board, and we're just going to let the Holy Spirit use us with the next episode. And it's going to be powerful. It's going to be really powerful. What I'm asking you guys to do today is also go to my link tree, linktr.ee/Kingdom Initiative. And you can get to my social media pages, to the ministry website, to the Prophetic Lounge. I do need to add on there the new YouTube Unfiltered Stories from Dr. K. The Spotify is on there. But I've asked you guys today to please go and subscribe. And so again, that is linktr.ee/Kingdom Initiative. So I want you to go on there, and you can get to all my, all my social media pages, my YouTube pages, and everything like that. And so, of course, this music here is my lyrics. Somebody else has seen it. It's in many different forms. And yeah, this is Unfiltered Stories from Dr. K. Real stories, raw truth, and kingdom impact. And so these are the scriptures that I want to include today. James 1 verse 19. Everyone should be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to become angry. Ephesians 4, verse 29. Let no corrupt communication proceed out of your mouth, but that which is good for edifying. Proverbs 18:21. Death and life are in the power of the tongue. And I often say that one. And Amos 3:3. Can two walk together unless they be agreed? And so take those scriptures and just remember those each and every time, when you are communicating. And of course, if you guys need any mentoring, spiritual guidance, or any more guidance on communication, that's why I gave you my link tree. I also have a PayHip. And all this is on my pages. But you can even just go to the ministry website or even my health and wellness website and just, leave a message. Say, hey, I want some mentoring. I want some life coaching. I want some counseling. And believe me, I am available, to help each and every person get to where they need to be at spiritually, mentally, physically, and emotionally, and to be right for God themselves and the people that they're attached to. And so, again, this is Dr. K, and I am signing out. Until next time, God bless.
Yeah. Welcome to the real, unfiltered, unfiltered story. Yeah, this is me. No mask, no filter, just honesty. Real life, real pain, real victory. Unfiltered stories, come right with me. I don't sugarcoat it, I just tell the truth. Every scar, every lesson, every hidden proof. Had to lose, had to fall just to rise again. Now I speak from a place where I've already been. See the world try to shape me, break me down, but I found my voice when I lost that sound. Now I walk in purpose, I move in light, and I say what I feel, I don't dim my sight. This ain't surface, it's that deep, it's that truth most people keep. What I lived, I now release, so somebody else can breathe. No filter stories, yeah, this is me. No mask, no filter, just honesty. Real life, real pain, real victory. Unfiltered stories, come right with me. This is where truth lives. This is where healing begins. This is Unfiltered Stories with Dr. K. Unfiltered.